So, hi everybody. Thanks for coming and wanting to be a read or getting refreshed and doing all that. So I'm just going to talk about my perspective about being a lead read, which I think, as we saw in the chat, some conversation about, is a lead read an official position? It's currently not an official position, except for when an agency administrator writes it in the delegation of authority and says, my lead read is this person, and contact them, work with them. But it's not a NIFC position, is not, or an NWCG position. It is something we're working on. But when you get more than a couple people, somebody's got to take the lead. You got to have one point of contact for firefighters. And that's sort of what the position really started out as. I have this first slide, I'm not normal. I don't want to be, I don't pretend to be. I'm me. That is just sort of me. But it is also a lot of, in the past, of how firefighters have seen resource advisors. You guys aren't firefighters. You're different. You're just sort of pretending to be firefighters. So you still get that a little bit, but we're being more and more accepted. But just realize we are separate. We don't do what they do. We do different things, but we have an important role. And then there's no playbook. There's been no training for how to be a lead read. So I've developed how I do it. Every lead's going to be a little different. I've done it for a while. I've come up with a lot of my own tools. Some people have really liked those tools and adapted them for themselves, but we're just, so I know I do things differently than other people. I changed the way I'm doing it. We're just working on it and trying to improve and get better every fire season. For those of you who don't know who I am, my day job, my everyday job is I'm the Heritage Program Manager for the Lassen National Forest. In real speak, I'm the forest archaeologist. I'm an archaeologist by training and profession. I'm also a travel relations liaison for the forest. So I help the forest supervisor and the line officers do all their travel relations with our local tribes. And I'm our resource advisor coordinator. I hold a liaison officer position on PNW Team 3. It's a Type 1 team. This will be, I think, my fourth year, going into my fourth year in that liaison position, and it's specifically for resource advisors. So the resource advisors have a one point of contact, direct point. They can talk to anybody on our team, but I'm there to make sure that they get all the care and feeding that they need and get the information to the right people on the team. And then I've been doing this, had a red card for 23 years. I got my red card in Yosemite to start. So June's been on this, so I was there before June. He took over my position. And then Nelson, I took over part of Nelson's position after he left. And then I've just kept going. Did a master's thesis on Native American burning, dendrochronology, fire history. Done a lot of other stuff. So a little bit of experience, a little bit of trial and error, a lot of failure. When I go on a fire, every fire incident, I have some main goals. My first goal is, let's just get home. Let's get home safe, intact, as little injured as possible, both physically and mentally. But getting home, I have a dog at home. My dog wants to see me. I want to see my dog. I try to do better every single time. I just do better than the last time. I can't expect to be perfect, and I don't want to be perfect. So I'm just trying to be better. Learn one new thing, about one new resource, about one new technique, one new way of working with people, one way of dealing with anything. And then protecting even just one resource per fire, something that maybe you didn't think you could protect, or it was the only thing that in that fire you could protect. When we're dealing with fires that do 100,000 acres overnight, sometimes all you can protect is one thing, and that's okay. Just do the best you can in the circumstances you have. And then if you make a mistake, try to correct it. Just try to correct those mistakes as you can. Don't dwell on those mistakes because you can't change them, but you can make it better. Try to do it better next time and learn from them. Always meeting new people, always making new friends, always working through those new relationships and see new things. Gotta enjoy the job while you can. It's not all sucking smoke and head down cutting line, or head down looking at the resource. Look up and look at the view. Sometimes it's beautiful. So you'll hear a lot in fire, leaders' intent. So adapting that to resource advisors as a lead read, we really need to be providing leaders' intent to all the resource advisors. What do we want to see from them? What do we want to hear? What do we expect from them? Expectations. If you don't know what's expected of you, you can't produce the right thing. So we as a lead have to be setting those standards. So for me, relationships, building those relationships with the people that need the information that we have to provide. If they don't know us and we don't know them, there's no information exchange. And if you don't have that relationship, you may be trying to exchange information, but people tend not to pay attention quite as much to people they don't have a relationship with. Safety, that get home every day, get back to camp every day. There's nothing out there. There's no resource worth a resource advisor's life. And so we need to be safe out there. If that means not going in the field that day, that means not going in the field that day, and that's okay. I always try to tell everybody, you're not a super read. You can't know everything about every resource in every situation. I build a team. I tend to build really big teams of resource advisors so that we can use each other and use all of our knowledge. But that means that we have to talk to each other as resource advisors and not try to be I'm going to tell you, I know everything about every resource and I'm going to be able to tell fire about every resource. So use that team. If you don't know, I'm an archaeologist. What do I know about birds and condors? I don't know much. I'm going to need to go talk to a wildlife biologist. I may not know anything about salmon, so I'm going to have to talk to a fisheries biologist. I talk to a retardant specialist if we have retardant issues. Go and talk to the people who know that information and then be able to convey it. Build the team, use the team. Also, it helps us talk through things, issues, good and bad issues, how to approach firefighters, how to work on things, what is the most important thing. So build the team and use every member of it. And don't make stuff up. If you don't know, it's okay to tell a firefighter, I don't know. I don't know what resources there. I just have a map that has a big circle on it that says protect. But I can go find out and come back to you and tell you what it is. Or they bring up an artifact to me and I'm like, I don't know what it is. I'll go find out. I don't know when that building was built, but I can find out. I'll come back and tell you. I don't know what kind of bird that is. It's okay to say that. I just really recommend find out and then bring it back to them. That helps that relationship. It helps them understand what and why they're protecting things. And then if you feel that they aren't listening, firefighters aren't listening, and there's going to be damage, you don't have to just sit back and go, oh, they're just going to do it. It's okay. I told them I'm just going to sit here and watch it happen. You don't have to do that. You don't have to fight them either. You don't have to stand in front of the bulldozer and go, no. But use your lead read. You're a field read, a reef, go back, call on the radio, call on the phone, text, anything. You have to drive back to camp. Tell your lead read, this issue is happening. This resource is being damaged. I think there's another way to do it, but they're stuck on that. The lead read can then go to the agency administrator or go straight to ops or go straight to the IC and say, hey, this is what I'm hearing from the field. We're thinking there might be a way to do both, protect the resource and stop the fire. Can we talk about it? And sometimes they'll go, sorry, we just got to do the damage. And the agency administrator agrees, yep, sorry, we have to stop the fire there. That's more important than that resource. I acknowledge it. You can even have an agency administrator sign a document that says they acknowledge that damage is going to take place and they're going to mitigate it after the fire. But at least everybody knows they're doing it. It's not just a line resource who knows that's happening, but everybody knows it's happening, and decisions can be made that may differ than what's happening in the field. And then it can work through operations to get more information, more different decisions, or even the same decision. But we can work the system, and we don't have to just sit back and go, oh, they're just going to do it. If things are damaged, things are burned over, don't look back. You're not going to deal with that during an active fire for the most part. You may deal with it if they want to expand the line or go back and do more damage to the site. But if a location is already damaged, you're going to monitor it during suppression repair. You're going to monitor it during bear. You're going to have all these other opportunities after the flames have died down, after active suppression is taking place. Your job is to look forward and look at what damage might occur in the future and how can I reduce it in the future. So don't get stuck in what's happened in the past. Look forward and look at what the firefighters are planning for the future. When you're out on the line and building that relationship, being a drive-by read, as I call it, you drive the line. If you see a firefighter and they're just, an engine crew or a hot shot crew or just an independent firefighter, you don't even roll down your window. You just drive past. Maybe you wave at them. Oh, you see the division soup. All right, now I just roll down my window. I say hi, and then I drive by. You're not building the relationship. You're not being able to tell firefighters what resources are out there, what's being able to be protected. Step out of your truck. Say, hey, this is who I am. Who are you? What's going on? How are things going? If nothing else, you can talk about the 10 and 18s and get what's the fire behavior? What's the local weather? What's the tactics? What are you doing? Getting intel so that you can help make better decisions. And maybe you're like, one of them will say, hey, we're just starting to put this line down this ridge. And you're like, oh, they didn't talk about that in the briefing. I didn't know that was happening. Oh, now I do. Now I can start talking to you. So, and then what are the resources there? You start connecting with them like, hey, I'm here. Look, right there, that historic structure is, from this date and it was built by this person. And there's this really cool story about it. Or, hey, did you know that the condors land right here? Have you seen a condor around? And connect them with the resources that are there on the fire and that they can help protect. The more they know about those resources, the better they can make decisions about those resources and how to protect them in ways that you probably didn't even think about. Caesar talked about the angel on the shoulders. That's, we all have that, the devil and the angel. And, in fire, I always consider the devil is just like, let's get it done. Let's get this fire out. Let's do it the quickest we can. Just put that dozer line in there and get it done. And it's one track mind of, let's just get this job done. And the angel is like, hey, there's some other things going on here that we have to consider too. And we're the, what do you have to consider too? So just being there, just being quiet and sitting there and talking to people is really helpful. So the two photos, the photo on the left, the firefighter with the string hanging out of their pocket, they're charging their phone, that's a resource advisor. She's sitting there at the division nightly roundup before they're going in the field and talking about stuff, talking about plans next year. She's mostly just listening, just finding out what's going on. And then, you know, like once you do that enough and you break in and you say little things about resource issues, or, hey, I saw this, and there's a snag patch over here you guys aren't talking about, then they start turning to you and going, hey, you know, hey, Lynn, what are your issues? What do you know? What's going on? Do you have a good map for us? Come on, you always, Reeds always have better maps than we do. Can we get a map from you? Just being there. And then the other picture on the right, I took that picture. I'm standing on top of a bear box. The fire blew over a line. They're all talking about where's the next contingency line going in? Where can we put this stuff? What's going on? And they're all talking, and all of a sudden I just like go, hey, hey. They all turn and look at me, and I was able to like put a little word in of like, hey, please don't put that dozer on that ridge because there's a National Historic Trail. The Oregon Trail used to use that ridge. Use it as a hand line, but please don't put a dozer line on. Oh, okay, thank you. We'll take that into consideration. As a lead, and when you have a lot of resource advisors, you know, every resource advisor has a specialty. Every resource advisor has an opinion. And anybody who's been in a NEPA ID team meeting or any kind of meeting with a lot of specialists, if there are 10 specialists in the room, you're going to have 15 ideas, 15 different ways of doing something. So that's not helpful to firefighters and to incident management teams to have a situation where every time they talk to a resource advisor, they get a different answer. It's confusing for resource advisors. Now add in 2,000 firefighters hearing 15 different answers. Or every single time a read drives by and they go, hey, I want a safety zone there. Can I put one in? Well, first the archaeologist says no. The biologist says yes. The timber guy says yes. You're not providing all the same information to all your reads, and the firefighters just get frustrated and mad at, what can I do? I don't know what to do. I can't help you if you guys aren't helping me. So as a lead read, getting everybody on your read group the same information and the same vocabulary of how you want them to deal with an issue. So that getting those resource maps, getting maps of all the resources on one map for all the reads, so that a read, when that division comes to them, go, I want to put a safety zone here, they can look at the map and go, I have something there. I may not know what it is, or maybe I do know what it is, but I have something there, or I don't have anything there. It's one answer. It's also, how are we dealing with it if we do have a resource there? So if you have a special management area, I know the Park Service tend to, pretty much one or two kind of management areas. Forest Service and BLM, we have 5 billion land management classifications across our landscape. You might end up with a national monument in the middle of the national forest. And then within that, you might have giant sequoia groves that have a different management direction. And what are you going to do when somebody wants to put a dozer in a giant sequoia grove? Well, when that first came to me, I didn't know, but I had to get an answer for 40 resource advisors. So we came up with, what do we want to have happen? We wrote up a document. We had the forest supervisor sign it. Then we actually said, hey, firefighters, you can't just do it on your own. It's not your decision. We ended up laminating the page, and anytime We gave it to all the resource advisors. Anytime it came up, they could hand that to the division or the firefighter and say, this is your process. The process was, you have to tell operations. Operations tells the IC. The reads will tell the agency administrator. The IC and agency administrator can work it out. But at the same time, the resource advisor is walking the line with operations, whoever's out there on the line, determines what kind of impact to the growth could happen, brings that information back to the decision makers, and then they can make a decision. That's one vocabulary for 40 reads. They all knew what they had to do in that circumstance if it came up, regardless of what specialty they were. Same thing, if you have this is going to come up, if you have difficult firefighters that are having trouble working with, you can direct how you want your reads to deal with that issue. If you have great people that you want to work with, you can be like, hey, I want to you guys go and run and work with them more. But coming up with those vocabulary everybody knows, those read guides, that's a single vocabulary. It tells every resource advisor, this is how you deal with this resource. So what are we advising on? I mean, we're advising, we say, oh, we're revising on natural and cultural resources. Well, what does that really mean? The big part is that we're providing information so that firefighters can make an informed decision. The sensitivity, this does come in with sensitivity of information, but here's my part about that is if they don't know it's there or what it is, how can they make an informed decision? If you're not telling them that there's a resource on that ridge that they're planning to put a dozer line on, you don't tell them it's not flagged. You can't get mad at them when it's damaged. So our job is to tell them that it's there. You can, if it's a sensitive issue, tell them it's a sensitive issue. I'm sorry, I don't know, but it's over there. You can say it sort of vaguely, but I'll go. If you need me to, I'll flag it. But if they don't know where it is, they can't help us. If they don't know what it is, they can't make an informed decision on how to help us. And really, it is their decision on tactics and strategy. So we have to be able to allow them to make those informed decisions. We are telling them what their decision space is, because they don't have blanket decision making. Firefighters, and the whole way that we train firefighters and teach them is, take leadership roles, make decisions, be decisive, do all that. But that still doesn't mean that every firefighter in every division can make all decisions. They can't decide to go into wilderness with a dozer. And they could, but it's beyond their decision space. So we're there to tell them, hey, if you want that bad enough, I can help you get it. But at this point, you don't have that authority. And then you can take it up the chain. In other circumstances, like when I'm talking about the groves, they did not have the authority to put a dozer line in a grove, even though it was not wilderness. We have lots of land management plans that say, no doing this or that, or no doing this or that in this other area. And that they talk about what can happen during wildfires. And we're supposed to be conveying that information. We need to be conveying that to the firefighters, the agency incident management team, and the agency administrators. Sometimes the agency administrators don't even know what their decision space is because they haven't read the forest plan or the BLM management plan or the Park Service park plan or the natural resource plan. So we're tracking that information down and then telling them what that document says, and then they can overrule it in that emergency thing, but at least they know what it is and they know what they're overruling or not overruling or upholding. And then we can help them, get the right paperwork going and getting the right people there to minimize that impact if that decision takes place. But it's okay to tell people, hey, at this moment you can't do that, but we're gonna help you get to that answer, to whatever the appropriate answer is. And we're also just going to be telling them, what are we advising them on? Where is the stuff they need to protect and what is it? So they can make informed decisions. So we're also advising on what damage we see. We're advising back to the local unit, to the agency administrator and the agency rep, what damages we do see, how we should mitigate that. A lot of that comes in the suppression repair plans, but we also can advise and provide information to bear teams and everything else. So we're just gathering that data and advising on paths forward for resource mitigations and repairs. All right. So you'll hear a lot of this. We're just advisors, we're resource advisors, and we are, as I said, we're advising on their decision space. We're advising on what the legal requirements are, and legal requirements don't go out the window just because we're in an emergency. Those legal requirements may be just abbreviated. So under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, there is still a process. During a fire, we still have to contact SHPO, tell them what we're doing, tell them what resources are at risk, tell them how we're protecting them, tell them, ask their advice, are we doing the right thing? Usually it's really quick. We tell them there's a fire, we tell them we're doing the best we can, and they go, go for it, we trust you. There's the same conversations with Fish and Wildlife. So we are still following the laws. We're just using whatever law is in place to do those things. And then we are providing that information back so that we know, so they can do their strategy and tactics. And if we don't, there's a thing of don't question everything, and firefighters really are smart, and they are totally come up with some great ideas. But we can also say, hey, we think it can be done better. How can we get to better? And help. And we have the agency administrator to help us ask that question of incident management teams and operations of how do we get to better? We're not going to win all those, and we're going to see resource damage, but it doesn't mean shouldn't. I apologize. We still have the obligation to bring the issues up and to talk about them and bring them so everybody can make those informed decisions. As the lead read, we have direct communication with the IC and operations and our AAs to help get that happening. And that all leads back into the objectives. Every firefighter from a basic firefighter type 2 doing initial attack with a type 5 IC has a delegation of authority from the line officer, from the park superintendent, forest supervisor, or whoever, saying, this is what you're supposed to do to stop fires, put fires out, or manage that fire. All the way up to a type 1 team that gets a delegation of authority too. And they have objectives in those, and there's usually always a line about protecting natural and cultural resources. So we're that line. We are the people bringing to life that line in that delegation of authority. And again, they can't make an informed decision. Nobody can make an informed decision if we don't tell them anything. So I've dealt with, I'm an archaeologist, I deal with a lot of confidential information. Travel relations, I've dealt with huge amounts of very, very culturally sensitive data that, and not been told about cultural sensitive data for one reason or another. I'm not the right person. I'm not the right sex. I'm not whatever. It's not appropriate for me to hear about that culturally sensitive data. And that's fine. But being able to tell somebody else at least enough information about where and what the value is so they can make that informed decision makes all the difference in the world. People understand about sensitive information, but they are on our side. We are all one team with an objective of putting the fire out in the most sensitive manner possible. The sensitivity might be the tract homes on one side of the fire, but the other side of the fire, the sensitivity might be a natural or cultural resource. But they need that information to make those appropriate strategic decisions and use the appropriate tactics. Here's sort of how some of the objectives come out. So not only in the delegation of authority, but you'll see every day in the planning meetings and in briefings, there'll be a big page up, at least on type 1 and type 2s. There's usually something up at the stage that says these are the objectives to the fire. It's also in the IAP. And usually somewhere, at least one of the objectives talks about natural cultural resource protection, and sometimes numerous places. So this one, on the rough fire in 2015, it's in 3 of the 6 objectives for the fire: natural resources, wilderness, cultural resources, and giant sequoia groves. So that's the place to find that. Those are the high ticket items, but we're, expanding that out and bringing them to life. Again, just what are their decision spaces? How do we help them figure out where the wilderness boundary is? Are they in a different kind of protection area that they should or shouldn't be using dozer in? Does the management plan say no cutting down trees of larger than 30 inches within owl packs, protected area something? What do the documents say, and how do they, how can they be overruled if the firefighters really need to do it? Here's another thing. This is that page about how to use bulldozers in giant sequoia groves, and all the process to do it, signed by the forest supervisor. And then here's that one voice, speaking of the read guide, building a read guide of what are the resources at risk during that fire and how to protect them. An example from Checo Bar. There's more examples. So we just started pulling things out of all the management documents. So in this fire, they had all these different types of management areas within the forest. So there's wild river areas, there's research natural areas, there's botanical areas, there's unique interest areas, backcountry recreation, wildlife habitat, and everything that's highlighted is what in that management document they said about suppression and what could and couldn't be used in that area. So we're just cutting and pasting these decisions that have been made 20 years previously into our read guide so that we knew what the direction was and we could just quote it if anybody needed it. And that gave us what our objectives was: where and what is the resource, what document told us that is, and then they can be like, okay, well, here's how I'm going to do that. Here's the tactic I'm going to use based on that information. And if you have a good relationship with them, you can talk about that and either, try to push them towards something else, even more protection or less protection. Sometimes they'll go into way overboard protection measures and you're like, whoa, didn't need that. That's okay. You can back up and do some more stuff. And they're like, oh, thanks. Appreciate that. But if you don't know anything about fire tactics, and sometimes even if you do know a lot about fire tactics, you don't need to just sit there and teach them those. Don't, I'll make up a new word, fire-splain a firefighter. Have a conversation. And if you don't know, or you want to learn, or you're trying to figure out why they're making that decision, just ask them. Ask them to explain it. So that you can come to a common understanding, because they may be like, oh, well, you just told me to protect this, and so I'm going to protect the hell out of it. And you're like, nope, didn't mean that. Or they may be like, well, you told me about that, but I don't think it's all that important, so I'm not. And you may be like, well, actually, it needs a lot more, and here's why it needs a lot more, and explaining that so that you can they can really come to a good, informed decision on tactics and strategies. And there's so many different ways to do everything. Every person's going to come up with a different way of doing it. If anybody has been through a transition between two Type 1 teams, you can see how differently each Type 1 team does the same job. That happens, you get a new division on the same area on the ground, and they come up with something completely different. So we have to work collaboratively, and just learn and figure things out as they go, and realize that there's multiple ways of dealing with the issue. So that's why we come up with what's the end goal, what do we want to see as the end goal, and then let them figure out how to get to that end goal. With this, every firefighter has some different levels of experience. Some have dealt with it a lot, some haven't. You have each resource advisor has different levels of experience. So that intermix will come up with new and innovative ways of dealing with things. Sometimes, just because of everything that's going on, time constraints, everything else, you have to come up with multiple ways of doing something. So all these pictures are one experience off the Thomas Fire outside of Santa Barbara in 2016-17. Dozer line, hundreds of miles of dozer line on this fire. Deaths on this fire, really large scale fire. Rain, huge rainstorm is coming. Anybody who knows, this is the fire that happened before the rainstorm that took out Montecito and part of Santa Barbara and part of Ventura. We knew this rainstorm was coming in. We knew there was no way we were going to repair all the dozer line on that fire before the rainstorm hit. So we had to triage. We came up with, we had our top three places that we needed to protect and needed repair. They also two of the three were like some of the most difficult places to get to on the fire. So first it was, all right, we'll just march heavy equipment in there, and then we'll do the work and march them back out. Well, that turned out, that's going to take too long. It's a day in, it's a day out. The storm's going to be here in 2 days. Okay, now what? Well, why don't we helicopter the equipment in? We actually got all the permissions to helicopter it in, and it was like, nope, we're not going to do that either. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to put put a hand crew in there. We get them in quickly, helicopter them in. But are those kind of water bars going to be effective on this slope, on this wide of a dozer line? When on one area, the bottom was a cultural resource. It was a historic building. On the other line, it was red-legged frog. There were only 2 other places that red-legged frog lived in the world. So then both these dozer lines are like shotgunning straight at these resources. So I just kept asking my resource advisors and my specialists, and we got some bear specialists and repair specialists and hydrologists, and I brought in like 2 hydrologists just for this. Get me an answer. I don't care how outlandish it is, get me an answer. And they came up with this. We're only going to put in like 2 water bars. We're going to put them with rice weed-free straw bales, and we're going to put them at the bottom. And we're going to let this erode from the top. It's going to hit these and direct it away from the resources at risk. And they were able to implement it in a couple hours, the day before the storm hit. And this was like the 5th thing we talked to the agency administrator and the ICs about. And they pulled the trigger and said, yep, go for it. And we did it. And it protected both the resources. So putting your heads together and coming up with multiple different ways of doing stuff until you come up with what actually gets implemented needs to happen out there. So what are you getting yourself into if you want to be a lead read, if you want to take on that leadership role? One, you're a supervisor. You're providing leadership. So if you don't like to supervise and deal with lots of different people, then this may not be the role you want to be. You're going to coordinate. You're going to manage people, things, information in a highly dynamic situation. So you're going to serve as a primary point of contact. If you're on anything, probably from a type 3 to a type 1 fire, that means you're not going in the field. You're going to be there in camp all day, almost sometimes just waiting for somebody from the team to come and talk to you, or you're going to be tracking down those people. Most of the time you won't be bored. You'll be running around with your head cut off, but you're that primary contact. Lots of people are going to talk to you. Other days it'll be quiet and you'll be wanting people to talk to you, at least until except for the beginning and the end of the day where you'll be really busy. But you want to take, if you're going to be a lead, you're going to want to take on that. I'm the primary contact. I'm going to be making some decisions. You also need to at least know something about all the different resources. As I said, you can't be a super read, but you at least have to know enough about the resource to know, I don't know, but I'm going to get somebody. I think we need to be thinking that way just as a line resource advisor, as a reef, but especially as a lead. If I don't know, I'm going to have to get somebody to help me. But I know enough that I can at least jump in, make some informed decisions based on the information I do have, and run forward with that. And not be afraid to do that and then sometimes find out, oh, there's some other information I didn't have. I'm going to change my mind. You are middle management. You're not the big boss. The agency administrator and agency rep are the big boss and the IC, but you're that buffer between all the field going people. And if you have a lot of worker bee reads doing tasks to track down information for you, you're their supervisor and directing all that and figuring out where do I need people when. Again, you're not on the line. You're figuring out where people should be going on the line, how many people I need on the line, and what's going on. You represent all the resources. You have a lot of things, a lot of resources to think about, both people-wise, natural and cultural resource-wise, but you do represent all the resources. Little story. So on the Thomas Fire too, one day I was sitting there doing some work. I had a lead archaeologist sitting next to me. I get a phone call or a text with a picture. And it's from a wildlife biologist, a reef, going, Linn, this just happened. And it's a picture of a firefighter with a prehistoric artifact, a whole bowl. And I was just like, holy, what? And I called them. Actually, I started a text, and first the lead arc was like, hey, Linn, maybe don't say that in your text. Okay, just call. Okay, called. And I call, and they're like, and talking to the reef, and she's like, and I'm like, well, well, why didn't you call an archaeologist? And she went, I thought I was. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Actually, I am an archaeologist. But as the lead read, I wasn't working as an archaeologist on that fire. So I went, oh, yep, I am, but I'm going to hand you off to the ARC, because they're going to give you a better answer than me. Because obviously I'm not thinking like an archaeologist right now. So sometimes you have to put your own resource to the side as a lead read. Sometimes you want a lead read that has that certain resource background, but you have to represent all the resources, whether you like it or not, or whether you know about them or not. And even though you have to do all of that, remember, you don't have to be a super read. You don't have to know everything, but you get the people that you do need to give you advice. And then you can pass that advice along. And sometimes it's, you feel like you're hanging out there, and that picture on the right is a helicopter pilot trying to figure out where we're going while flying the helicopter. Sometimes that's the way a lead read feels. Like, I got nothing under my feet and I don't know where I'm going. You just do the best you can and work it out. So you're providing all this information, you're providing that leader's intent, information, you're ordering equipment, you're clarifying direction, you're getting intent from your agency administrator and the incident management team. And you're taking care of all those resource advisors that are in the office or out on the line, and getting them what they need to do their job. Sometimes you're coaching and teaching all those people on your team. You're building that relationship with the command and general staff of the team that's there and that agency administrator. And then you're going to a lot of meetings. That whole planning cycle that Jason talked about, you can go into practically all the meetings in that planning cycle. And when you have a double shift, you have a night, day and night shifts, it's a lot. Again, I'm going to go back to, you get the people on the ground the information they need. So you get them all that guidance, you get them the maps, you get them decisions AA's made, and you're planning out ahead. You should be thinking about, what are the resources at risk a day out, 2 days out, a week out, a month out? What are the projections of the fire? How big is that map I'm making for all the resources at risk? Is it just a 2-mile buffer from the fire perimeter, or is it a 40-mile buffer from where the fire is right now? Where's that going, and how much gathering am I getting? So my way of wrangling all the information is, I built this form, this checklist, and I just walk in and start talking to everybody. Okay, what are the resources you know about? What are the concerns you have? Where's your archaeologist? Where's your wildlife biologist? Where can I talk to them? What's their phone number? What's their email? Where's the GIS? What have you already dealt with? How's it already gone? And just writing it down, and then coming up with these guides to get it out. And it doesn't matter how down and dirty they are, getting them out early and then revising them as you go, making sure everybody has them is a really important part of the job. And then just communicating a lot, talking to everybody, talking to the incident management team, talking to the local specialists and everybody in your organization. Sometimes the chief of the Forest Service or the chief of the Park Service will show up, and you got to talk to them. The people you're going to talk to within the team are operations, plans. You're going to be given plans, a lot of paperwork, what divisions are people assigned to, any special instructions for resources on those divisions. Sometimes that data that's not too sensitive or is buffered enough, Put it on the IAP maps. Put it so that every firefighter has it and knows where it is. The other stuff you may not be putting on that, but you're making those decisions on what goes on the map and what doesn't. You're asking for specialized maps coming out of the situation unit and the GIS shop that just go to reads. You're working with that. You're working with logistics on ordering people and equipment. You're working on finance, because sometimes finance come to you and like, what does this time that your read put down mean? I don't understand. Or you forgot to sign it, or, you know, this is outside something or whatever. That order costs too much. Sorry, we don't think you need to spend $100,000 to dust abate a certain road. Well, that's fine. The agency administrator does say that they want to spend $100,000 on that. What form do I have to fill out? In your relationship and what do you need, you're talking to the agency administrator and agency rep. Find out what they want from you. What do they want? What do they need? Do they need help? Do you need help on weird orders like that dust abatement? Are you having problems? Is there a really hard issue that they need to make a decision on? Going back to that dozer line in the giant sequoias. When I first brought that up to the AA, they were just like, what? They're not going to do that, are they? I said, well, I don't know. They aren't right now, but they might be in 2 days. Oh, damn, I didn't even think about that. That's a hard issue, right? Yeah. Okay, well, let's come up with a plan. So, and will you back me up? If I say we don't want it, will you back me up? Yes or no? You got to know whether somebody's going to back you up or not. Greasing the skids on those issues, making sure you're ahead of the game. Dealing with conflicts. Sometimes you'll have conflicts between resource advisors. Sometimes you'll have a conflict with the resource advisor and yourself. Sometimes the resource advisor will have conflicts with firefighters. So the agency administrator and agency rep need to be knowing about that. Sometimes you'll be having to have a really hard conversation about the use of their local people. One, I need your local people to help me, and I can't get a hold of them, and they're not returning emails or phone calls. Okay, let me get on that. 2, your locals are overextended. They're trying to do their normal job and be on the fire, and they're not doing well at either one. What's your priority? Where do you want them? If you really want them to finish that NEPA, well, then have them do that, and I will get an outside resource advisor. Or is the fire more important? Or I can't have them driving 2 hours back home because they want to go home every night. This is a safety issue. I need you to help me deal with this safety issue of your local advisor. And then educating. Sometimes you gotta talk to your agency administrators and be like, hey, did you know that the plan says no dozers in roadless areas? Oh no, didn't realize that. Okay, well, they've already put dozers in wilderness areas, or they're planning on it. So here's the education. The regional forester and the Forest Service has to make that decision for proposed roadless areas. Oh, okay. And teach. Sometimes you get brand new AAs or ARs, and they don't know the ropes. Sometimes they know more than you do, but sometimes you know a little bit more than they do. So gently teaching them. Building the team. You can build whatever you want, whatever you need at the time. Sometimes that's 1 or 2 resource advisors. Sometimes it's 45 resource advisors. But you better be ready for whatever you decide you want and need. And that's, how big is your army? It's partly dependent on how big the fire is, how many divisions there are, how much heavy equipment there is, how much resource at risk there are, the complexity of that, all of those different things come into play on how big that army is. And then, dealing with them, what divisions are they going on? Do you have them paired for safety? Do you have a trainee with an experienced person, juggling all that? Remember that supervisory roles, you're tracking them, you're watching work-rest ratios, you're resolving issues, you're signing CTRs, you're doing more orders, you're demoting, you're doing performance evaluations, doing all of this. And then you're also communicating all the time, not only at those big briefings and all the meetings that the fire team is having, you're creating meetings and getting information to your resource advisors in your own little groups, in briefings and debriefings with reads coming in and out. You're having morning and evening meetings sometimes with your resource advisors. You're sometimes checking in with all your resource advisors in the afternoon to find out what they need for the next day. Getting all these information and nipping problems before they get really big. And then, okay, the fire's starting to die down and you're like, whew, okay, I'm gonna rest. And then plans comes in and goes, where's your repair plan? I'm like, oh, I have to write a document that tells you how to repair all this damage you did? Okay. I don't even know where all the damage is. I don't know what resources it affected. Getting all that information together, identifying and prioritizing that resource repair, dealing with what resources were hit, how many arc sites, how many stream crossings, critical habitat, all of that. And then how are they going to repair it? What are the water bar specs? All of that. So if you choose to take all that on, you can be a lead resource advisor. If you choose not to take it on, at least now you maybe have an overview of what all that person does, and maybe give them some slack and ask them, how can I help you do your job? They're trying to help you do your job on the line. But they sometimes need help too, and don't know how to ask for it. So, because there's a lot going on. There you go. It's another spiel for getting information after you've taken this class. The resources that are out there. I think people have probably mentioned these before. There is the resource advisor cohort, where we do have monthly calls and talk about different issues, spend an hour getting a little intense training on whatever issue. There is Cloud Vault, where there's a lot of information. It probably will, before September, move to a new location. And as it moves, we're going to try to organize it a little better, but it's there. There's also a fire archaeology cohort. We don't have the meetings as much as we used to, but there is a folder for that too out there in the cloud. There's also firearchaeology.com, which is mostly about archaeology, but there's a lot of just resource advising information out there on it. There's a Facebook page for fire archaeology. Again, it's a lot of just fire and resource advising information. And that's open to everybody. There is an unofficial lead read course that we've taught once. We're going to teach it again in May. There will be a few spots left in it that we're going to put the announcement out very soon, out to general people. We were just accommodating the people we had to cancel on last year first. And then there's a fire archaeology course. It's the basic, okay, you're an archaeologist now. What do you do when you're on a fire? From pre-planning all the way to bear and repair. And then we're holding that course this year too. So I think I did that within my hour. Sorry, it went a little bit over noon, and I can stay on to take questions. And hopefully you guys could hear me as I rush through that. There's a lot going on a fire and it goes quick.
Thank you, Lynn. That was awesome. We have time for a question or two. Rich, Lisa.
Yeah, lots of really good questions. I had one question that came in from Monique for Lynn about multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional fires. If you have a lead read on one agency and the fire bumps into another agency and you have a different lead read, how does that coordination work?
That's a great question. It happens a lot, especially on big fires these days. So there's many different ways that it can happen. Often you'll have two leads, one for each agency. I will add that within the Forest Service, if the fire goes between two forests, you may have a lead read on each forest, even though they're the same agency. So Lion's Head Fire last year was on 3 forests and a reservation, and there were 4 lead reads. I suggest that if you have an experienced lead read who has done interagency fires, that they have a good conversation with the agency administrators, and especially on type 1 fires, that you try to have one lead that is the main point of contact. Maybe assistant leads that represent the different agencies or the different forests or whatever is going on, just so it's easier for the team. Because most teams don't have people like me as a liaison. When we had the 4 leads, it was very nice to have a liaison on the team because I could act as that juggler. But sitting all the AAs down and go, how's this going to work? How do you want it to work? Do you want your own? Do you want us to have one voice with the team? They need to make that decision, but you need to talk about it. Come up with the right decision for that fire.
Thanks, Lynn. That was awesome. One person asked what happened to the whole pot in the field.
The whole pot in the field. We immediately started a tribal consultation, and in conjunction with, it was in Chumash territory, the Chumash worked with the forest to determine the correct place for it to be housed for the future. I think it's currently at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History, but it was on Forest Service land, so it is part of the Forest Service collection in that museum.
Thanks. Rich, do you have anything?
I am good. I learned a lot. Thanks, Lynn.
Thank you all. Have a great, safe fire season. Get home and learn something new.
Thanks again.